later on. This is not fair. I'm not sure if we can get the state auditor to do anything about this one. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, brother. How are you?
We could file a claim on this one. If you're wondering where all the luck in the world has gone, it's gone to Massachusetts. On February 23rd, Christine Wilson won $1 million. She played for the first time an instant ticket game. She won away. It was the first time she ever played, and she wins $1 million. Now, less than 10 weeks later, she buys another one, and she wins another $1 million. Yes. Now, that's just not fair. I want a lawsuit or an investigation into this.
I do like coming on
Massachusetts,
like right after you guys read the Powerball winners, because that just means there's like thousands of radio listeners who are mad, and then the next thing they hear is an auditor. They're like, gosh,
yes. But
I lost money, and now this guy.
How do we do this? How do we constantly not even get one number? That's just, mathematically, it just seems like
you're
you
really
have
bad
every
at it.
once
I don't know. You're really bad at it.
Big time. It's like poker. It's why I love playing poker, but I never play for cash.
Yeah,
because I just give them don't waste my time. Here's my money. I'm leaving.
That's right.
I got other things to do.
That's right. Yeah.
Speaking of which, there are a lot of people who don't do that, though. They think, with a little extracurricular activity, I'm looking at just your April here. State auditor employee, no, that's not it. That was good news. That was the highest CPA score.
Yeah.
We
had the highest CPA on the Mississippi CPA exam this year. It's unheard of for the auditor's office to be employing that person.
Abney Brewer?
Abney Brewer. She's brilliant. She has a master's in data analytics, and she came to the auditor's office because of our Stay in the SIP program, which I've talked about on the air before. It's a great program.
Yes. It's a perfect example there. She could probably do a lot better somewhere else as far as financially.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You don't have a board that oversees you, but did you look into that 2799 reconstitution of boards?
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that it had been watered down a good bit, and that the boards were going to be reconstituted, and it'd be new appointments, I guess, in January.
Every 4 years.
Yeah. That one snuck up on me, to be honest with you. That's not
a
something.
lot of people.
That's not something that I'd heard talked about before. Did it pass? I have no idea if it passed.
Yeah, it did pass.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's on the governor's desk. I think he has till Thursday to sign it.
Okay.
If he doesn't sign it, it becomes law, or else he can veto it. But looks like it'll go through. But
interesting.
For all I know.
Interesting.
All right, give me some news here. What's going on as far as anything new that we need to know about?
Well, I've been talking for over a year now about DEI on our campuses, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I feel like folks are starting to wake up to the fact that this DEI bureaucrats, the sort of ideology that's being promoted in higher education around the country, is really, really corroding the minds of this next generation, because now folks can finally see it come to life on TV. I mean, that's the really sad part of what's going on right now. And the thing that I have always pushed, this idea that I've always argued for is, we need to realize that this ideology is consistent across the board. It's being pushed by DEI bureaucrats, by professors. It's being pushed in all 50 states, and unfortunately in a state like Mississippi, you and I are helping to pay for it. We're subsidizing the indoctrination of these kids at our public universities, and at some point we got to just step up and say, no, lawmakers, you have to stop this. This has to be put to a stop. Other states are doing it. Florida's banned DEI spending at their higher universities. Texas has, Oklahoma has, Idaho has, Utah has. Mississippi, for some reason, can't get it together and can't do that. But we got to keep fighting.
Why do you think that is?
At the risk of making everyone mad, I think we have a lot of go-along to get-along politicians. That's what I think we have in Mississippi. I think we got some people. I'll just tell you this, and I won't name the legislator's name because he was being honest with me, and I appreciated it. He told me, he said, I think some of the problem in our legislature, and it's not everyone is like this, but some of the problem is that we got some politicians who just like to be liked. They just like to be liked. They don't want to go to a university president and say, hey, stop doing that. They just don't want to do it. It's uncomfortable for them to have difficult conversations. And maybe I'm just built this way. I just don't wake up in the morning thinking, how can I be liked by more people? I wake up in the morning thinking, how can I do my job better? How can I be more transparent and give Mississippi taxpayers more visibility into how their taxpayer money is being spent? That's the first stuff I think about, not like how can I yuck it up with my buddies and make everybody like me.
Yeah.
So we just have to have more people who are willing to say, no, I don't like this. This is not an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars, and we're not going to have this in Mississippi.
Then you look at the situation and just kind of blossomed here since you were scheduled to come on last week for today. But it's an example is hit the nation with this protest. The good example why DEI is a bad idea is when you start seeing what went on at Ole Miss, and then you see just an incredible tsunami of students waving the flag, singing patriotic songs, doing it peacefully. And then you have one student out there who you say, okay, maybe DEI would be a good idea for him because of what he did, and he's getting the spotlight.
Well, I think we should not obsess over that one young man. I look at those videos and I see hundreds of young people who are singing the Star-Spangled Banner, who are chanting USA. That's a great look for the University of Mississippi, seeing that video of Star-Spangled Banner. I mean, that's the kind of thing that parents around the country are going to look at, and they're like, I don't want my kid indoctrinated. I don't want to teach my kid that they need to treat everybody the same, regardless of what they look like or who they are, and then have their mind warped once they go off to higher education. And that's what we ought to be focusing on. And here's the other thing. There are so many journalists who will dive into these stories about what happened at Ole Miss. I haven't seen a ton of these journalists going up to the kids, the pro-Hamas protesters, and asking them, hey, what do you think about the fact that Hamas went into Israel when Israel was a peaceful nation, not doing anything to Hamas? They went into Israel and then they murdered women and children. What do you think about that? I don't see any kids being asked that question, but that's what they're protesting on behalf of. They're protesting on behalf of pro-Hamas causes, and that's not right. And that's the kind of thing that our kids are learning at some of these universities that needs to stop.
What's even worse is when you start asking them, get 2 questions deep into the history of Israel and Palestine and how Palestine evolved. What's the history of the ownership of that land? Everything. They have no idea.
They don't know. They
have no earthly idea.
That's why you're seeing some of these reporters at other places, not in Mississippi, but they're going up to the protesters and they're asking these pro-Hamas protesters, why are you here? And there's just this stone-faced silence. And now a lot of the protest groups at some of these campuses are telling their members, hey, don't talk to anybody in the press because you're going to make us look dumb. We have one select spokesperson, and you need to funnel all of the reporters to that one select spokesperson. But even that hadn't worked out. I don't know if you saw the video from Columbia, but they had one spokeswoman who stood up and was advocating on behalf of the pro-Hamas protesters, and even she folded like a cheap accordion under basic questions. Basic question: why did you take a building over and not plan to eat or drink? Did you think that somebody was going to bring it to you like they were your mommy or your daddy? I mean, normal.
I think at the end of the day, she did. That she was asking for to have some service drop them off.
Of course. Normal people don't think,
come by and drop me some food off.
Normal people don't think like this. Like, I wake up in the morning and I think, my truck is on empty. If I don't go get gas, I'm not going to make it to work. And I need to go to work so I can make money, so I can put gas in my truck. She's thinking like, why hasn't someone given me gas? That's the logic train that they go through to get to where they are. And we need better parenting in this country, certainly, but we shouldn't make it worse by sending kids off to these universities where their mind is being warped in some of these classes, and the message is being reinforced by DEI bureaucrats that you and I are paying for. That's the whole problem.
I put together these things over the years, the motivational moments. In the morning, there was Arnold, former governor of California, earlier today. I don't know if you caught that one, but talking about rearing our kids, and if it's tough, that's good. Stop making snowflakes out of them. Then earlier, and I had this one put together too, and you may have caught this one or not. I hate to be redundant this early, but it does play into the DEI, and I'll play a little bit of this, and it's the pastor. His name is James Ward Jr.
Saying what needs to be said.
If DEI works anywhere, it has to work everywhere. Let me tell you where DEI does not work. The NBA and the NFL. Where are the Asian, Latino, and Hispanic basketball and football players? Where are the black guys in the National Hockey League? Those businesses are performance based. It really comes down to the issue of justice. And if you really want to go deep to the heart of this, and when I say that DEI treats the symptom but not the sickness, America is in a new civil war right now. The first civil war was the North versus the South. The new civil war is a war of ideologies concerning justice. And it's really going to come down to who gets to define what justice is, whether that's biblical justice or social justice. When moral law stands alone and DEI initiatives are based upon that, somebody gets to pretend that they are God.
Saying what needs to be said.
We'll talk more about it.
SuperTalk.
Back with the State Auditor. You talk about DEI. If you wanted to look at some place where DEI is killing us, it is in the universities. I agree with you. That's future leaders of our country. But you take a look. Lance sent me a link the other, I think it was last week, just a composite of all the members of the cabinet and their bio of this administration's cabinet. And every single one of them is a DEI appointment. They're there because they either broke the glass ceiling or they did something not on their meritorious work. And it goes on. Adrienne Todman, she is the HUD director.
Utility costs for low and moderate income families across the country.
Do you believe in the tooth fairy? Do you believe in the Easter Bunny?
Senator Kennedy, I'll allow you the last word. And then
Do you believe that Jimmy Hoffa died of a natural death?
Okay. Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
I mean, you listen to some of these interviews, and it is amazing what these people do not know. They have all of the warning in the world. We're going to call you up next week or 2 weeks. Here's what we want to know. And then they get there. I'm not sure. They have no information at all. But it permeates not only at the colleges, but elsewhere throughout our entire country.
Well,
Your
you know,
thoughts?
yeah. If you go back and read the history of this concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which again sounds like nice words to a lot of people. I mean, they pick some really good words to to really brand their effort. You know, it goes back to the 1960s and 70s where you had a group of folks who were radicals, really schooled in Marxist thinking, and they tried to do a bunch of crazy stuff. So, Paul, you remember the Weather Underground and the folks who were planting bombs in buildings and that sort of thing. And then once the public
Patty
realized,
Hearst.
Absolutely, Angela Davis, all of these folks, and when the public reacted negatively to out-and-out violence, this group of people, the ones that weren't arrested, they decided to pursue a strategy called the Long March Through the Institutions. And what they decided to do was to take over the universities and become tenured professors. And then what they said is, we'll then educate the next wave of professors. And then those professors, there'll be enough of them at that point who will educate the next wave of people who will go into the government. And then there'll be enough people at that point to influence the kinds of folks that go into corporations. And they believed, when they set this strategy out, that it would take them 100 years. So we're about 50 years into that experiment, and they are succeeding incredibly well at their mission. I mean, they have infiltrated a lot of institutions of American society, and they've done so through hiring practices and that sort of thing. But again, it all starts at the universities. That's where they started. And it's not just hiring. It's also money spent on so-called research. It's also money spent on training sessions. So I'll give you a Mississippi example. At one of our Mississippi public universities, a taxpayer-funded university that you and I sponsor, there are over 20 DEI staffers. So they're in an office called the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. That's what their job is. They work on these issues. And they produce reports that talk about all the great things that they accomplish with your money every year. One of their greatest accomplishments last year was forcing the School of Engineering to sit through training sessions on microaggressions, which, if you don't know what microaggressions are, that's what they call instances where you may say something and make somebody feel a little bit uncomfortable. So that's what we're doing here.
I thought it might have been road rage against
that's right.
Prius.
That's right. That's just called aggression. Yeah. But those are the kinds of things that they're funding. They funded a grant to pay for research into, get this, preschool social justice yoga.
Wow.
Preschool social justice yoga. Now, look, I've got a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old at home. I don't know if I could get them to do yoga, but I really, really am certain that I can't get them to do social justice yoga. I'm positive of that, whatever that is. That's where your money is going. That's where your money is going on our campuses.
Here's the other part of that, is when you start realizing that that this president wants to pay off that college tuition. And as was mentioned earlier, the pipe fitter, the welder, the guys that maybe are out there probably making twice or three times more money than they're going to make in their liberal arts degree. We've got to pay for it. They've got to pay for that student loan.
My dad works in the oil field every day. He's got to pay taxes so that there's some kid out there who can go take a class on the history of sexuality and hip hop. Like that is literally a class. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm just quoting from the websites of your taxpayer-funded universities.
Do you have any dollar figures? How much is this costing us per university? Or
yeah, so we did a snapshot study that looked at the years 2019 to 2023, and during that time, we found that your public university spent about $23 million on DEI. $11 million of that was from state taxpayers. And what I would say is that's a very conservative estimate. That's taking the numbers that the universities gave us on their own and accepting them as true. So if you did a deeper dive, you probably would come up with a bigger number. But apparently that number is not big enough to inspire the legislature to action because there were two bills this year to stop DEI spending at our Mississippi public universities, and they both died. And the only thing that any legislator could say about that study and how much money we were spending was one legislator got up in the House and said that the report that I just quoted from was, quote, extremely misleading. I called him after he got on the floor and I said, what are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? You're questioning numbers put together by professional analysts at the auditor's office, and you didn't have an argument for why they were wrong. You just said they were extremely misleading, and then you let it go at that, and you use that as an excuse to keep funneling money to DEI in Mississippi. That is an outrage, man. That is an absolute outrage, and you ought to be embarrassed.
But never pointed out what the discrepancies were.
No, not at all, because he can't. And so on the phone, he apologized. He said, I shouldn't have said that. But this is the whole problem, is that we get politicians who don't want to ruffle any feathers. They don't want to change anything. They don't want to make anybody mad. And as long as that happens, the loudest and craziest voices in the room continue to dictate where our money goes. And that means it's going to continue to go to DEI bureaucracies that warp the minds of your kids. That's the whole problem here.
Fighting back in a way, we had a good example of that. When the Ole Miss students out there decided to fight back, they fought back in that manner. They fought back with a different response, and that matters. And that's probably the only thing you can do. I do have to ask you this. Does it permeate itself over into the private universities also, or is it mostly in public universities?
Oh, no, it definitely does. I mean, you're seeing it at Columbia, at Harvard.
I'm talking about specifically in Mississippi.
Oh, I have no idea. I have not seen any protests at Millsaps or any of the other private universities. It's possible it's happening. I just didn't see it, haven't watched it. But look, this is pervasive at tons of universities across the country. And for months, I was told, this ideology doesn't exist in Mississippi. The DEI stuff doesn't exist in Mississippi. That's only at these liberal Ivy League schools and all that kind of stuff. That is nonsense. That is an absolute nonsense. Last week, a university program at a taxpayer-funded university here in Mississippi, and a university finance program did drag queen Q&A on a campus at a Mississippi public university. Like, come on. Is that a good use of our taxpayer money? And don't tell me that's not happening here. It's on the website. You can go find it. This is the kind of stuff that normal people look at and they're like, why can't my money just go to educate doctors, accountants, engineers, business people, economists, the future thinkers and workers of our economy? Why can't it just go to that? Is that too crazy to ask for?
When this was brought up as far as the SAFE Act in the House and in the Senate, and you had, certainly in the House, you had a vast majority of the African Americans questioning this. Was it needed? We got other things to do that are more important, et cetera, et cetera. This doesn't happen in our state. And it goes on and on and on. I still am at a loss to understand the culture as far as the African American culture, why that's, and I think it's one of those things that is taken seriously by the voters, the African American voters, but it's not transferred to the politicians in the Black Caucus.
Well, yeah, I would think about it this way. You know, President Trump got a ton of African-American votes when he ran for office, and that's what I look at. I look at the behavior of normal voters. I don't look at the behavior of politicians. I look at the behavior of normal voters. And normal voters, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, Latino, Asian, whatever. Normal voters are getting fed up with all this. They're getting fed up with it. I talked to a pollster a couple of days ago, and he was saying, you know, the last time I looked at a poll, anytime you show people what their taxpayer money is being spent on this crazy woke stuff, it's like 90-10 against. You know, like normal people just don't like this stuff. And this is really not even a battle between left and right in some ways. It's really a battle between normal and crazy. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Michael Walsh is Congressman Walsh. I think he's a Republican from Florida.
This bag of bushings stamped out by machinists, not anything high-tech about this. All of this bag is compliant with the FAA specifications. How much do you think the Air Force pays for this bag of bushings?
I don't know, Congressman.
$90,000.
So a bag of bushings. They do go in the jet engines, of course, but you probably could buy them at Lowe's for about $50 or not $90,000. But you're absolutely positively right. So I want to ask you how the legislature treated you as far as your budget going forward and a couple of other things. Final segment with the State Auditor coming up next. Everhart. All right. Back with the Shad White State Auditor. So how did we do as far as the budget's concerned?
Good. Now that I've spent 45 minutes complaining about the legislature, I guess I'll... Thank you for the money. We had a good year budget-wise. You know, we have some great allies in the legislature who always stick up for the auditor's office. And what they have given us the ability to do is to really do a deep dive into government waste in agencies. And so that's something that I'm passionate about. You know, we're always going to have our embezzlement cases that we're investigating and we're locking people up for, but we've also done a deep dive into big questions and small questions. So example of a small question, you know, we looked at how many state employees have cell phones paid for by me and you, the taxpayer, that aren't even turned on. So what cell phone plans are we paying for phones that aren't even used? And the state spends in a given year about $350,000 on cell phones that don't even get used. So that might seem like small potatoes in the grand scheme of things, but to a normal taxpayer like me and you, $350,000 is a lot of money. So let's get that going to something that matters, something that makes a difference in people's lives, like roads, bridges, cops, teacher salaries, the stuff that we all care about, all the way up to big entitlement programs where folks who are on there are making too much money to actually be eligible for the program in the first place. We found in one program anywhere between $60 and $144 million a year going to folks who shouldn't be on the program. That's big dollars. Those are big dollars that could be going to, again, the things that you and I care about, things that keep us safe, things that keep us moving on the roads, things that educate our kids, teacher salaries, those sorts of things.
I think a lot of people would ask this. If you do it without fear, political fear in the future, you're looking at, 5-10 years from now, is there a point where we need to have a discussion as far as the efficiency of the state agencies, combining, changing, looking at the whole concept? I know that we did this as far as reconstitution of boards, which I don't disagree with as far as Senator Sparks did. It was the staggered terms that I had a problem with. But back to the question. Is there a better way and efficiency to do this marching forward? Because, we have the same template we've had since we became a state for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely there is. There's absolutely room for efficiency in government. Government is notoriously inefficient because it's folks spending other people's money. That's the core problem, right? So you have to constantly be looking for efficiencies, and I love my job because it gives me the ability to do that. To give you an example, I think that a lot of our back office functions for state agencies should all be consolidated into one office. In fact, 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote an op-ed with the person who is then the head of DFA in the Clarion Ledger and said, look, we ought to be combining some HR functions and procurement functions and all sorts of back office functions into one big office and let that office serve all the state agencies rather than have one of those employees at every single individual state agency. And there was legislation to make that happen, and it doesn't pass. It never passes. So those are the kinds of things that I like working on as state auditor because I feel like I have a big mag light. You know, I get to turn the mag light on and I get to shine it on a problem or an inefficiency. You can't fix it as auditor. That's the frustrating part about being auditors. You can't make any of those changes.
Any of those beams of light ever hits the PERS as far as the state auditor's office?
So we do audits of the PERS office operations, but we don't do audits of the investments of PERS. That oversight is done by the state treasurer and the PERS board. So it's a different entity that would look at how that money is being invested.
Yeah. What about because we had this earlier in the year talking about Holly Springs and the stuff that's going on there with the municipality. It's way beyond reasonable, and these people have suffered for so long on that one. Is there a part where the state auditor could come in and at least do an oversight of that?
Well, one thing I would say is we're seeing in a lot of cities the same thing that's happening in that instance that you're talking about, where,
really,
for example,
in Mississippi,
water bills will be really high, but and so high that it seems unreasonable. But city services are not improving, or the water system is collapsing. You see that in a lot of other places. Jackson had that problem for a long time before the federal takeover. And so there's this question of, all right, well, what can you do about it, Shad? Well, number one, by law, I am not allowed to go audit cities, period. That's in the statute. It's not Shad chooses not to. It's that Shad is not allowed to audit cities. But two, I would say this: if you're an employee of one of those cities out there and you see somebody stealing water money, you see somebody stealing water payments, you can come and talk to us in the auditor's office, and we can launch a specific criminal investigation into that one specific instance. So if you know of something, come talk to us. You can do so anonymously. We don't tell anybody who you are or where we got the info. And we've arrested tons of folks around the state for embezzling money that's supposed to go to upkeep the water programs.
Past due water bills. I was reading the story. It's in the archives. Tracewood Apartments on Old Canton Road in the city of Jackson, a past due bill for their water, $443,000.
I believe it.
Where's that money gone?
I believe it, yeah. If it's even been collected.
Always, sir. Yeah. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.